So you might use backing tracks or play-alongs to help you practice jazz standards and other material in your jazz playing, and maybe even practice using ones that we have on our channel. But did you know that they actually could be hurting your jazz playing? I'll tell you all about it coming right up. What's up, Brent here from Learn Jazz Standards, which is a blog, a podcast, and videos all geared towards helping you become a better jazz musician. Hey, if you don't want to miss anything that's going on here on this channel, make sure you subscribe in this video on our page, and you will be locked in to everything that is going on here. So, years ago, back in 2010, when Learn Jazz Standards, our website, first came out, we started putting up jazz standard play-alongs on YouTube because at the time the site was just about learning jazz standards, and now it's so much more than that. It's just everything jazz education. We have a podcast, we do instructional videos like this, but at the time we were just trying to provide an extra resource by providing play-along backing tracks for those who needed them. Well, we didn't know it was going to blow up and get so big, and it certainly did, and now our channel has lots of views on it, which is really cool. But at the same time, it's important for that reason for me to tell you why play-alongs are not necessarily always the best way to be practicing to improve. So I'm going to go right into that. Before we start, let me ask you this very important question. I'm going to ask you it again at the end. Are you using play-alongs as a tool, or are you using it as a crutch? Something to keep in mind as we talk about all this stuff. Let's start first by identifying what are the problems with play-alongs. Well, first problem is there is no interaction, right? And jazz is all about interaction. When you're playing with a backing track, it's static. So it's kind of just the same thing over and over again. You're not really able to feed off of the other musicians, which is really the spirit of improvisation. The second problem is it doesn't train you for the unexpected. Tacking off the last one, if you're just hearing the same thing over and over again, you're not really able to react to anything. So you will be training yourself to just play the same thing and expect the same thing every single time. Whereas if you're playing with other musicians, things will come up that may distract you, that might be different than you expected, and that's how we want to be training ourselves. Now, the third problem, the last problem, is it doesn't really build a time feel. When you kind of have all that harmonic information there, when you have the drums, when you have the piano or the guitar, the bass, everything's kind of filled in there for you. So it doesn't really help you with that time feel that you really need to start developing on your own. Now, I know this is starting out a little negative, and trust me, we're going to get to the positives too. I'm going to tell you when you should use play-alongs in just one second, but let me talk about when you should not use play-alongs. Let's establish this right now. First reason when you should not use play-alongs is when you're learning new songs. You don't really want to be using a play-along to learn the chord changes. I know it can be tempting, but really you need to go to the sources, the recordings, to get them. And yes, you can reference chord charts and all that good stuff, but I would not use them as primary resources for actually learning a tune. Now, the second thing I would not suggest to use play-alongs for is when you're learning jazz language. Now, that might seem obvious. You shouldn't be learning, the comping patterns that are being played. You shouldn't be learning the bass lines, stuff like that. But you'd be surprised how many students tell me that they're learning how to play bass lines off of play-alongs. And at the end of the day, it's not a sin. It's not a horrible crime, but it's way better to go to the sources, to go to Paul Chambers to learn your bass lines, or Ray Brown, or go to Wynton Kelly to learn how to comp, or, go to Philly Joe Jones to learn how to use the ride cymbal. Those are the real places you probably want to be going, and not necessarily play-alongs. All right, enough of the negative. Let me talk about the positives when you should use play-alongs for your jazz practicing. The first one is when you have no one to practice with. Now, a lot of people that follow me in my audience, they don't necessarily always have people to practice with, to play with. They may live in a rural area. They're not in a big city like New York where I live, and so there's not as many people to play with. That's totally okay to use a play-along in that case when you want to have some fun, hear some harmonic interaction, and have some fun with just doing it that way. Now, the second reason you might want to use play-alongs is if you have a real difficult passage that you're trying to work on. Now, let's just take Fee Fi Fo Fum by Wayne Shorter, for example. Those are really tough chord changes. Maybe you just want to loop the first, 5 or 6 bars. Well, it's hard to find a buddy that actually wants to sit down and do that. So this is where I think play along software or real band software like Band in a Box, I'm going to link that up in the card and then also in the description below, is really great because you can use that software to your advantage to just loop things over and over again, to slow it down, to speed it up, and that can be a great way to do stuff like that. I also do this when I compose my own music sometimes, and I find that there's some hard changes to improvise over. I like to log those into Band in a Box and just kind of work those out and to make sure I got those solid. Now, the last reason that would be great to use play-alongs is if you've already worked with a metronome or just working by yourself, because again, we want to build up that time feel. We don't want to use play-alongs as a crutch. So I want to ask you that same question I asked you at the very beginning. Are you using play-alongs as a crutch, or are you using them as a tool? I want you to reply to that in the comments below. Let me know if you have been using it as a tool or a crutch, and if you have any opinions or insight on this as well. All right, make sure you subscribe. I'll see you next time in the next video.